Hey guys, this is Tierlis here with another Warlords of Draenor beta video focusing on fire mages and the very small changes that have happened to the class. Almost really nothing has changed to fire mages. They've gained an ability. One of their abilities has changed. They've lost a good chunk of abilities due that they really didn't use in their main spec. They gained a couple of glyphs, they have their brand new Draenor perks, and then most of their changes come in the talent tree, which we will have to go down tier by tier. But otherwise, not too much has changed with fire mages. The brand new ability that fire mages received is Amplify magic, and it amplifies the effects of helpful magic, increasing all healing received by 12% for all party and raid members within 100 yards. Basically, Blizzard felt that mages did not have enough raid utility, so this is their solution to that problem. They just added an Amplify magic. If you're in a portion of a boss where damage is heavy, healers can call out for Amplify magic. It gives mage a little bit more use within the raid. I can go ahead and use it here. It's a nice little spell visual. Imagine that going across 30 to 40 characters in a raid. So it's a nice little addition to the class. Fire mages have one changed ability, and that's in Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath now replaces Cone of Cold for fire mages, but that's not necessarily the most important part. The important part is that the disoriented effect of Dragon's Breath now shares a diminishing return with all other mesmerize effects. Now, Blizzard is doing this to reduce the amount of CC that is happening in the PvP world. They're bringing a lot of these different CC abilities and putting them under a diminishing return umbrella to kind of just reduce overall the amount of CC that's in the game, because right now on live there's way too much CC going on. So this is their way of removing bulk of CC in the game. So I wouldn't worry about this change. It's going to be something that applies to the entire classes, all the classes as a whole, so don't think too much into it. Fire mages have lost a lot of abilities. Most of this is because Blizzard looked at fire mages and were like, okay, do fire mages use this ability? No, they don't, so let's just remove it from the class or from the spec. And that's what happened. They lost Burning Soul, which was the reduction in cast time lost when you took damaging attacks. They lost Counterspell, which was your 4-second silence. They lost Conjure Mana Gem, so you will no longer get your Mana Gems. But this is not as important because, to be honest, Mana Gems and Mana in particular is not important to any spec in the game that is DPS that is not named Arcane Mage. It's just not important anymore. You never run out of mana anymore on any of these specs. The only one that has to manage that is Arcane Mages, and that's due to their mastery. So no really big loss there. In terms of spec, they lost Shatter, Ice Lance, Frost Armor, Deep Freeze, Blizzard, Mage Armor, Arcane Explosion, Evocation, and Pyromaniac, which was a kind of a bomb tier application of the Pyromaniac effect. Most of those are abilities that you don't use. Mage Armor and Frost Armor are interchangeable with Magma. I think it's Magma Armor, Molten Armor. Excuse me. It's now passive ability attached to your class. You no longer have to apply it, so it just changes depending on your spec. Same thing with Blizzard and Arcane Explosion. Flame Strike is the fire equivalent of those, so it just changes based on the spec. If you switch over to Frost, your Flame Strike spell will change into Blizzard and so forth. So most of it's just removing abilities that you didn't use. I know the important one there was Evocation. Evocation, as I said, it's the same thing with Mana Gems. It's just you're not going to need that mana regeneration anymore, which I think is a real shame because that was an important part, I think, to DPS classes, and especially to classes like Mage, and it's really disappointing to see them just ignore it and say that mana doesn't mean anything anymore to the DPS classes. So, moving on, there are 3 new glyphs to the Fire Mage class. These 3 are, the first of these is Glyph of Dragon's Breath, which increases the damage of Dragon's Breath done by 100%, so just straight damage buff. There is Glyph of Interruption, which when you successfully counterspell a target, the remaining cooldown on counterspell is reduced by 4 seconds. This is exclusive with Glyph of Counterspell, so that means that basically you can only have Glyph of Interruption or Glyph of Counterspell active at a time. You cannot have both of them active. The last one here is Glyph of Regenerative Ice, which is you regenerate 4% of your maximum health every 1 second for the duration of Ice Block. I don't know how popular this is going to be. It does replace, I guess, Evocation's healing that was in the game, but at the same time, Ice Block has a 5-minute cooldown, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out, and whether or not Ice Block's cooldown may be reduced in the future, we shall see. Those are the three, new glyphs that came to fire mages. Otherwise, not too much going on with the glyphs. They're basically, none of them have changed, so that moves us into Draenor perks. Now, fire mages really got the better deal with Draenor perks. They really did. So, I mean, if I look at these right here, most of them are not... Some classes got just straight damage increases, and fire mages more got actual changes to their abilities, which is really nice. First of these is Enhanced Inferno Blast, which reduces the cooldown of Inferno Blast by 1 second. Second of these is incredibly important, which is Enhanced Pyrotechnics. Your Fireball or Frostfire Bolt, when your Fireball or Frostfire Bolt fail to critically strike a target, you gain 5% increased chance for a Fireball or Frostfire Bolt to be a critical strike for 15 seconds. This effect ends when Fireball or Frostfire Bolt successfully critically strike a target. I'm going to try and show this to you. This is actually a really nice, change, and it bridges the gap between people with low armor and high armor. If you look in the top right corner, we're going to see if we can get one here. I just got 2 crits in a row though, and I keep getting crits. So here's the first. I got Enhanced Pyrotechnics, and let's see if I can get a second one. See, there's a second stack, and then it'll keep going up until you finally get that critical strike that you need. This bridges the gap from the lower end geared fire mages to the higher end geared, because the problem was that to actually be good at fire, you needed to have the higher end gear with all the massive critical strike, because the class is so much balanced and focused around that pyro blast instant crit and the functionality with it. So that's one change that they made to bridge that gap and make things a lot more bearable for fire mages. Other perks include improved combustion, which increases the duration of combustion by 20%. Improved Dragon's Breath and improved Fireball / Frostfire Bolt is just damage increase. There's improved Flame Strike, which removes the cooldown on Flame Strike. There's improved Inferno Blast, which Inferno Blast now spreads the damage over time effects of Pyroblast, Ignite, and Combustion to 2 additional targets. There's improved Pyroblast, which increases the critical strike chance of Pyroblast by 15%. And then last, and one of my favorites, is improved Scorch. After casting Scorch, your movement speed is increased by 30%. That's going to be a nice PvP buff for fire mages out there to make them, less of a standing still target. Overall, of the 9 perks, only 2 of them are damage buffs. The rest are something that's actively changing your abilities, which I really like, and I think is one of the best things about the fire mage class that they got. That moves us into the final portion of this. Before we will get into the talents, I want to show you one little spell visual change. Flame Strike has got a little bit of an upgrade in their spell visuals, so go ahead and use it so you can just see what it looks like. The ground animation and everything just looks a little bit nicer than it used to. But that being said, let's go ahead and look into this talent tree. I'm going to have to go tier by tier because there's been a lot of changes. The first change here is the 15 tier, which is Presence of Mind is now missing. Blizzard felt that Presence of Mind was too powerful to have in the talent tree, and at the same time they felt that Arcane did not have enough utility, so they moved Presence of Mind out of the talent tree and into the Arcane spec directly, and then replaced it with Evanescence. Evanescence is you fade into the nether, avoiding all attacks against you for 3 seconds, castable while another spell is in progress, and unaffected by the global cooldown. That's pretty nice. It replaces Ice Block. Considering Ice Block's really long cooldown, I don't know if that's such a loss. This one's only a 45-second cooldown. It's not quite up to par with what Presence of Mind were, and it doesn't really fit of the tier of movement, but this is what they have for now. I don't know if it'll change in the future. I'll go ahead and show you the spell visual. It's just a kind of a smoky, ethereal effect that goes across your body, and then you're back to whatever you did. The level 30 tier is based on defensive cooldowns, and you have your Ice Barrier and your Flame Glow. And Alter Time has been brought in. It it used to be baseline ability. Now it's been taken out, and its DPS effect has been removed from the equation. So no longer can you go back in time and get your old DPS effects that you had at the end of this portion. It's just for health. So if you're about to be bursted down in an RBG, you can click alter time, and you get bursted down, and then your health pops back up. So it's a really nice thing to have in that defensive cooldown thing. You can choose it between the other two abilities. On the 45 tier, not much has changed. There's a visual change with Ring of Frost. I'll go ahead and use it right here. You're going to see they changed how the freezing looks in terms... Oh, goodness. Only one of them froze. You can see the ice crystals and whatnot there. It looks really nice. Just a small visual change that they did for... It's actually all, any type of freezing across the board. Hunter's new freezing trap looks the same way. So, nice change there. Another thing that I need to mention before I move on to the next tier is that Ice Ward got the same treatment as Dragon's Breath. It now shares diminishing returns. The frozen effect off of it now shares diminishing returns with all other root effects. Once again, this is something that's happening across all classes. I wouldn't see it as a nerf. It's just going to make PvP more fun, to be honest. It's going to make it a lot more enjoyable. The level 60 tier really did not change much at all. There possibly were some damage changes and so forth, but I'm not going into the damage and numbers changes on these abilities. The level 75 tier was the bomb tier, and it has now been changed into the AoE tier. Living Bomb, as you can see, is still here on the left hand side, is exclusive to fire, and it's pretty much it hasn't changed at all. It's still there, and I honestly, of this tier, it still, I think, does possibly the most single target damage. I don't know, numbers haven't been finalized, but that's probably the talent I see. It's the talent that I see PvE players taking. The one in the middle here is a passive. It's unstable magic, and that is your Arcane Blast, Fireball, Frostbolt have a 30% chance to explode on impact, dealing an additional 50% damage to the target and to all other enemies within 8 yards. So it's like Diablo's Demon Hunter's Bola shot, I guess you could say. So you start attacking the target, and then you have that AoE damage. I really see no use for it in PvP. It's not there, and especially next to Living Bomb and especially Blast Wave, I just don't see it being taken. Blast Wave is back again. It used to be a fire spell, it was taken away, now it's back again. It replaces Frost Nova. Frost Nova had its cooldown increased from 25 seconds to 30 seconds. But if you choose this talent on any of your mage specs, it replaces Frost Nova with a double charge ability. In this case, fire, it's Blast Wave. Causes an explosion around the target enemy or ally, dealing 6,000 fire damage to all enemies within 8 yards and reducing movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. A primary enemy target will take 100% increased damage, max 2 charges. Now, the most important part of this is the fact that you can cast it on an ally. So if your healer friend is taking a lot of damage, you can cast Blast Wave on your healer and get the players off of him. So I can go over here and go ahead and use this on this target right underneath it. And you may lose the damage component if they don't have anyone near them, but you can also slow people down and so forth. So I think it's really important in that function, and it adds huge PvP utility to the class. You can see the damage here, the damage numbers off of it right there. The level 90 tier used to be all focused on just the mana regeneration of the spec. Well, that, as I said, is gone. Like, the mana regeneration is not important anymore, so they've changed it. Rune of Power is still here, but they've changed it so that Rune of Power no longer has that mana regeneration facts. It just has the damage increase. Incanter's Flow replaces Incanter's Ward, which was that shield, and it's a very different talent. It's very interesting talent, and we have no clue how it's going to work yet, or how much use is going to get out of it yet. But for right now, Incanter's Flow, magical energy flows through you while in combat, building up to 25% increased damage and then diminishing down to 5% increased damage, cycling every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, it's going to go back and forth between 5 and 25% damage, and you'll have to, align your spells together to get that 25% damage increase buff. Don't know how that's going to be, perceived. Mirror Image used to be baseline ability, been taken out, put into a talent. I'm sorry if you're a huge Mirror Image fan, you now have to take it as a talent if you want to keep it. It's now on this bar with the damage buff theme in mind. The last tier here, your level 100 tier, is somewhat interesting. You have Kindling, which is it's just a buff to your DPS cooldown. So your Fireball, Pyroblast, and Inferno Blast critical strikes reduce the cooldown remaining on combustion by 1 second. So that's, you know, one change there. And I honestly, I don't know, because numbers haven't been finalized. I don't know how popular it's going to be. The talent over here on the right is Meteor, which calls down a meteor which lands at the target location after 2.77 seconds, dealing 20,000 damage split evenly between all targets within 8 yards. It also burns the ground for an additional 1,600 fire damage every 1 second for 8 seconds. So that's about 13,000 damage. Just to put that into perspective, because you don't know really what the numbers are on beta, 20,000 plus 13,000, Fireball hits for 7,500. And Pyroblast hits for about 19,000. That gives you an idea of just how powerful Meteor is. I'm going to go ahead and cast it here. Once again, Blizzard really outdid themselves on the spell visuals of this class. I don't have that on my bars right here. Here we go. Alright. Wonderful animation here. Just comes in. It reminds me of the Crusaders Meteor that's in Diablo 3. So, pretty cool. You can see the ticking of the burning there. So, definitely a cool ability. I think it will be used probably over Kindling in PvP, and definitely over Prismatic Crystal in PvP. Prismatic Crystal it conjures a Prismatic Crystal at the target location, which is attackable by the Mage and takes 30% additional damage. When the crystal takes damage, it instantly releases a burst of energy, dealing damage split evenly between all enemies within 8 yards. Honestly, the problem with this one is that it's static, it won't move, and so I see only PvEers taking it. When I am able to finally get this ability, because I'm waiting for Meteor to come off cooldown, I'm going to place it on the ground here. It's going to be this huge crystal, and when anyone sees this crystal, they're just going to run from it. So I just see this being used in PvE. I'm going to go ahead and place it here. I'm going to start casting abilities, see if I can get some damage off on it, and see what happens. And you will see the damage numbers pop up here. It does a lot of damage, but it's on a timetable, and unless you have procs like that, you may not get the amount of damage out of it that I just did. So it's definitely a talent that I'm not really sure how popular it's going to be. It's also on a minute cooldown, so, and next to Meteor, it's just, to be honest, it's just not as fun as Meteor. So that's pretty much everything that's going on with Fire Mage. I apologize, this took a little bit longer than I thought, but Fire Mages, you know, the talents are really where the bulk of their changes happen, and that's the case for all mages in general. The next video is going to be on Frost Mages, and I will get that out as soon as possible. Otherwise, I will see you guys in that video. See you later. Tierlis out.